Ever wondered what makes someone leave a really nasty comment online? Is it just some deep character flaw, or could it be something that could happen to any of us? Even you? Well, today we're diving into the surprising science of what actually turns ordinary people into online trolls. So let's just jump right in with the big question, the one that really frames this whole thing. Are trolls born that way? Are they just a few bad apples out there spoiling the internet for everyone else? Or are they made by the situations we find ourselves in? Now, to get to the bottom of that, we first have to talk about our really common idea, what you might call the myth of the troll. We've all heard this, right? This idea that trolling is done by trolls, a small group of really antisocial people. And honestly, it's kind of comforting to think that way. It draws a nice, clear line between us and them. But what if the science tells a completely different story? Okay, so let's move away from the popular narrative and get into the hard evidence. Because some researchers at Stanford and Cornell set up this absolutely fascinating experiment to find out what really triggers trolling. Their whole goal was to see if they could actually make ordinary people start trolling. Not by changing who they are, but just by tweaking two simple things in their environment. So here's the setup. It was a two-parter. First, they deliberately put people into either a good mood or a bad mood. How? By giving them either a super easy quiz or a really, really hard one. Then, they dropped them into an online discussion. Some discussions started off totally neutral, while others had a few troll posts already sitting right at the top. The big question was, is just your mood and the context of the conversation enough to turn you into a troll? And wow, the results were just crystal clear. Take a look. If you were in a good mood and in a normal discussion, about 35% of people posted something troll-like. But just being in a bad mood, that bumps it up to almost 50%. Same thing if you just saw other trolls. But the real kicker, the worst case scenario, being in a bad mood and seeing other trolls first, in that group, a staggering 68% of posts were flagged as trolling. So let's just put a fine point on that. When you combine a bad mood with an already toxic environment, you literally double the chances that an average person will start trolling. It's not about who they are fundamentally. It's about where they are and how they're feeling in that exact moment. Okay, so that's a pretty powerful result in a controlled lab. But you gotta ask, right? Does this actually hold up in the wild? Across millions and millions of real internet comments. Well, it turns out, yes, it absolutely does. The researchers analyzed 16 million posts on CNN.com, and they found that trolling predictably peaks late at night and on Mondays at the start of the work week. And guess what? That's exactly when other big population studies show our moods are at their absolute worst. The real world follows the same pattern. All right, so we know mood and context are huge. They're massive triggers. But there's another really important piece of the puzzle here, and it has to do with the unique nature of the internet itself. I'm talking about anonymity. Psychologists have a term for this. It's called the online disinhibition effect. Basically, when we feel anonymous, like nobody knows who we are, and invisible, we tend to drop all the social guards that keep our behavior in check when we're face-to-face with people. And check this out. This chart from a long-term study shows exactly how that process works. Feeling anonymous doesn't just instantly flip a switch and make you a bully. It's more subtle. Over time, it starts to create more positive or accepting attitudes toward that kind of behavior. You start to think, maybe it's not so bad. And those new attitudes are what directly predict whether you'll actually engage in cyberbullying. It's like a slow erosion of your own norms, all hidden behind a screen. So let's start pulling all these threads together. This isn't really about good people suddenly losing their morals online. It's something different. It's a shift in who you think you are in that moment. So the old school theory was called de-individuation. It basically said that in an anonymous crowd, you kind of lose your sense of self and just become part of a chaotic mob. But the more modern evidence-based idea is called the side model. And it says we don't lose our identity, we shift it. We stop thinking of ourselves as me, an individual, and start identifying with us as a member of whatever online group we're in. And once that happens, we just start conforming to that group's rules, whether they're good or bad. And here's the stat that really drives this home. In that huge CNN dataset, 1 out of every 4 flagged troll-like posts came from people who had 0 prior history of ever being flagged. These aren't the chronic trolls. These are just regular people who, on one particular day, in one particular discussion, got tipped over the edge by the situation. And that brings us to our final and maybe the most unsettling discovery. Trolling isn't just something that's triggered by a situation, it turns out it's also contagious. Just listen to how the researchers put it. They said that trolling, like laughter, can be contagious. Think about that. This nasty, antisocial behavior can spread from person to person, just like a good social one. But how does that even work? Well, the best explanation is something called the broken windows theory. The idea is simple. Imagine an abandoned building. If one window is broken and nobody fixes it, it sends a signal that no one cares about this place. And pretty soon, more windows get broken. A single troll post works the exact same way. It signals, hey, nobody's in charge here. The rules don't apply. And that makes it way more likely that the next person who comes along will throw a verbal rock too. And yep, you guessed it, the data from CNN.com proves this is happening. Discussions that started with just one flagged troll post were way more likely to spiral into a complete dumpster fire of trolling from lots of different people. That first troll sets the tone, and everyone else just follows along. So when you put it all together, it's pretty clear. Trolls aren't born, they're made. They're made by bad moods, by toxic online spaces, and by the very nature of the internet itself. This research really shows that under the right, or maybe I should say the wrong, circumstances, anyone can be a troll. And that leaves us with one last really big question. If any of us can be the problem, what's our shared responsibility to be part of the solution?